I don't remember when I first noticed her. Maybe it was the way she always stood at the edge of the cafe counter, never rushing the barista, waiting like time bent differently for her. Or maybe it was how she'd tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, not self-conscious, just practiced, like it was muscle memory. She wasn't supposed to matter to me. She was my friend's mom, Mrs. Hahn. That's how I thought of her, even though my friend had gone off to another city months ago, barely texting anymore. She still lived here. I still saw her sometimes, at the grocery store, or, more often than not, at this cafe. I was 22. She was in her mid-40s. The math was obvious, and yet it didn't stop my eyes from finding her when she came in. The first time we spoke, it wasn't even about anything. "You always get the black coffee," she said, nodding at the cup in my hand. I shrugged. "Habit." She smiled, small, almost private. "It suits you." That was it. Nothing more. But I kept replaying it later, while scrolling through messages I didn't send. I typed out something to her son, then erased it. I didn't want to admit I hadn't moved on the way he had. The next morning, she was there again. Same seat by the window. Same half-empty notebook open in front of her. She wrote slowly, pen hovering as if every word required permission. "Do you ever finish that coffee?" I asked, surprising myself. She looked up, eyes steady. "Do you ever finish yours?" I laughed, though quietly. She had me there. My cup was always lukewarm by the time I noticed. I thought about leaving then, before it turned into something noticeable. But she asked, "You've got class today?" "Not until 2. "Then sit." Her hand barely gestured, palm open toward the empty chair across from her. I hesitated, but sat anyway. We didn't talk much. I watched her write. She watched the street outside. A comfortable silence for her. For me, it was the opposite. My chest felt like a taut wire. At one point, she reached for her cup. Her fingers brushed the sleeve of her sweater back. Pale wrist, faint blue veins, the kind of detail you shouldn't notice but do anyway. I flicked my eyes away, toward the napkin I'd folded and refolded until the crease was sharp. "I shouldn't keep you," she said eventually, closing the notebook. Her voice was lighter now, but something in it felt like a test. "You're not." Her smile was almost there, then gone. She slipped the pen into her bag and stood. I half expected her to just leave without another word, but she paused, hand on the strap of her bag. "This stays between us, okay?" I blinked. "What does?" "Nothing," she said, but her gaze lingered long enough to make me think she'd said more than she intended. Then she walked out, the little bell over the cafe door chiming after her. I sat there, staring at my cooling coffee, trying to figure out why my hands felt unsteady. That night, I found myself checking my phone more often than I wanted to admit. Scrolling. Waiting. I didn't even know what for. And then, close to midnight, a message lit up the screen. Not from my friend. From her. "If you're ever around tomorrow, I'll be at the cafe again. Don't feel obligated." The words were casual, but I read them 3 times, like they were anything but. The next afternoon, I went to the cafe earlier than usual. Not because she had texted, I told myself, though that wasn't true. I kept checking the door anyway. When she finally walked in, she didn't look surprised to see me, though her eyes flicked over, steady but knowing. "You're early," she said, setting her bag down across from me. "You're late," I answered, and immediately regretted how familiar it sounded. But she only raised an eyebrow, half amused, half curious, before going to order. When she returned, she slid a cup toward me. "Try it," she said. "It's not coffee." I took a cautious sip. "Chamomile." You look like someone who needs it more than caffeine." I smirked, but the warmth of it spread differently than coffee, slower, softer. "You sound like my mom." She laughed then, low, almost reluctant. "Don't say that. Makes me feel ancient." I wanted to tell her she didn't look it. Instead, I just fiddled with the rim of the cup, circling the edge with my finger. She noticed, I think, because her expression softened, the kind of look you give someone when you've already forgiven them for something they haven't done yet. We didn't talk about her son. It felt like the one rule we weren't allowed to touch. But I thought about him anyway. How he used to crash on my couch after long nights. How his laugh filled every room. Sitting with her now felt like a betrayal, though nothing had happened. Nothing at all. She must have read something on my face, because she asked quietly, "Do you miss him?" I nodded. "Yeah, more than he probably knows." Her eyes lowered to her hands, folded loosely on the table. "He's always been good at moving on." "And you?" I asked before I could stop myself. She didn't look up. "Not as good." There was a pause. She brushed the corner of her notebook with her thumb, like she needed something to hold. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the silence between us was thick enough already. Instead, I said, "You write a lot." "Not really. Just things I don't say out loud." "Like what?" Her smile curved without humor. "You'll have to earn that." The conversation drifted then, light and surface level, about the weather, about how the cafe playlist hadn't changed in months. But beneath it all, I kept circling back to that one line. Things I don't say out loud. When she reached for her tea, her sleeve slid back again, and without thinking, I steadied the cup for her. Just a brief brush of my fingers against hers. Nothing more. But her eyes caught mine instantly, and for a second, neither of us moved. I pulled back first, pretending to adjust my napkin. "Sorry." "Don't be," she said, too softly, and the words sat there between us longer than they should have. Later, she offered me a ride home. My apartment was only a 10-minute walk, but I didn't argue. In her car, the silence was different, thicker, more personal. I noticed the faint smell of her perfume mixed with the old leather of the seats. I noticed the way she drove with both hands, precise, like she didn't trust the road. When she pulled up outside my building, she didn't unlock the doors right away. Instead, she glanced at me, almost careful. "You don't have to explain this to anyone," she said. "Explain what?" She gave a short laugh, but her eyes didn't match. "Exactly." I got out, unsure whether to thank her or say nothing. She rolled the window down before I could decide. "Hey," she called after me. I leaned down, hands shoved into my jacket pockets. "This stays between us." Her words echoed the ones from the cafe, but this time, there was no smile to soften them, just a steadiness that made my chest tighten. I nodded. She drove off. That night, lying awake, I kept seeing her hand brushing mine, kept hearing her voice in the car. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me that I didn't plan to see her again so soon. But habits form fast, and by the third afternoon I was back at the cafe, already scanning the window seat. She was there, of course. Notebook closed this time. Just her tea cooling beside her. She looked up when I walked in. Not surprised. Like she'd been waiting. "You're predictable," she said as I sat down. "You texted," I reminded her. Her lips curved slightly, then faded. "Did I?" We stayed there, not talking much. She stirred her tea, though she hadn't added sugar. I drummed my fingers against my knee under the table, little sounds filling the space we didn't. At one point, I asked, "Do you ever tell him you come here?" Her pen paused against the page. "No, why not?" Her gaze stayed on the notebook. "Some things aren't meant to be shared." Before I could answer, someone clapped a hand against my shoulder. "Hey man, thought that was you." It was Adam, another friend from school. His eyes flicked between us, the half-empty cups, the closeness of our chairs. He raised his eyebrows, just enough to suggest something. "This is, I started." "Mrs. Hahn," she finished, calm, as though she'd prepared for it. Adam gave a polite nod, but his grin lingered too long before he excused himself. I caught her jaw tighten as the bell above the door jingled again. We didn't speak for a while after that. "You don't have to," I began. "I know," she cut in. "It's fine." But her hand pressed flat against her notebook, knuckles pale. I wanted to reach across the table. I didn't. Instead, I said, "He'll probably mention it." She looked at me then, direct, steady. "And you'll say what?" I swallowed. "That I was having tea. That's all." Her expression softened, though the tension in her shoulders didn't. She leaned back, finally letting out a slow breath. "Tea. Right." When she stood to leave, I followed her out. The sky had turned overcast, a sharp chill in the air. She pulled her sweater tighter, and without thinking, I offered my jacket. Her hand brushed mine as she refused it. Not a grab, not deliberate, just skin against skin, lingering too long for it to be nothing. We both froze. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away, almost violently. She stepped back, adjusting her bag strap. "Don't," she said. But it was quieter than a warning, more like a plea. I nodded, though my pulse was hammering. We walked in silence until the corner where we'd part ways. She slowed, as if to say something more, then shook her head and gave the smallest smile. "Good night," she whispered. I almost told her what I wanted then, that I'd been waiting for these silences more than the words. But instead, I let her walk away, jacket still slung over my arm, breath visible in the cold air. A step closer, and I would have kissed her. But we didn't plan to meet that evening. It just happened, like so many things had. I was walking home from class, headphones half in, half out, when I saw her across the street. She was standing outside the pharmacy, paper bag in hand, the dusk light making her look older and younger at the same time. She spotted me before I could decide whether to cross or pretend I hadn't seen her. She raised a hand. Small, hesitant. I crossed. "You walk everywhere," she said, as though it mattered. "It's easier than waiting for the bus." She nodded, hugging the paper bag against her chest. "Mind if I join?" So we walked, side by side, a little too close for comfort. The air had that cool bite of early evening. Streetlights humming on, one by one. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she asked, "What do you do when it gets too much?" I glanced at her. Too much what? Everything. She pressed the bag tighter, as though it might steady her. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I kicked at a stone, watched it skitter along the sidewalk. "I don't know. Pretend I'm fine, I guess. Wait for it to pass." Her lips pressed together. "That sounds familiar." We turned onto a quieter street. The silence stretched until I thought it might break me. So I said it, not fully but close. "Sometimes I think I shouldn't be here. With you." She stopped walking. I kept a step ahead before realizing, then turned back. Her face was unreadable in the half-light. "Why?" she asked. "You know why." Her laugh was short, brittle. "Because of my son? Because I'm older?" "Yes," I said, and then softer, and no. Her eyes searched mine, as if trying to find the part one wasn't saying. We ended up on a bench in the small park near my building. She set the paper bag down beside her. I sat with my hands shoved deep in my pockets, shoulders hunched. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Do you know how lonely it is, being seen only as someone's mother?" Her voice caught, though she tried to disguise it with a smile. I swallowed. "You're more than that." Her gaze snapped to me, sharp, wet at the edges. Don't what? Don't say things you don't mean." "I do mean it." My voice came out rougher than I intended. I looked away, at the faint glow of the street lamp over the path. "I notice you. I've noticed you for a long time." There it was. Not a full confession, but enough to make the air between us change. She sat back slowly, eyes closing. "This isn't fair." "I know." We stayed like that for a while. The sounds of the city at a distance, a dog barking somewhere. Her hand rested on the bench between us, close enough that if I moved mine an inch, they'd touch. I stared at that space. Imagined it filled. Imagined the world tilting because of it. She must have felt it too, because she drew in a shaky breath. "If we do this," she didn't finish. Her hand trembled just slightly. Mine itched to cover it. But I didn't move. Neither did she. The silence stretched, so thin it almost tore. Finally, she asked, barely above a whisper, "Tell me, what happens then?" And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. The next day, I went to the cafe. She wasn't there. At first, I thought nothing of it. People have lives, errands, reasons. But when she wasn't there the next day, and the next, something hollow started to settle in my chest. I kept glancing at the door, expecting her hand on the glass, that calm way she entered, as though she always knew she belonged in a room. But the door kept opening for strangers. By the fourth day, I stopped showing up too. Instead, I walked past her house once, late evening. The porch light was on, curtains drawn. I imagined her inside, tea cooling on the counter, notebook shut tight. I thought about knocking, but my feet wouldn't let me climb the steps. It wasn't until a week later that I saw her again. Not at the cafe, but in the grocery store. I almost didn't recognize her. Hair pulled back, no notebook, no smile waiting. Just a woman pushing a cart down an aisle, looking like she wanted to be invisible. She noticed me, stopped, hands gripping the cart handle. "Hi," I said, trying for casual. Her reply was a small nod. No warmth this time. No invitation to sit, to talk, to exist in the same silence. "How have you been?" I asked, voice catching on the question. "Busy," she said. Nothing more. I glanced at her cart, half-filled, practical. Bread, milk, nothing indulgent, nothing soft. "You stopped coming," I said before I could stop myself. She hesitated, then looked past me at the shelves. I thought it was better. Better for who? Her grip on the cart tightened. "For you. For me. For everyone." I wanted to argue, but the way she said it, measured, final, made my throat close up. Someone turned the corner into the aisle, and just like that, she pushed her cart forward, leaving me standing there among cereal boxes and canned beans. After that, I didn't see her for weeks. My routine unraveled. I stopped going to the cafe altogether, stopped walking the same streets. At night, I caught myself drafting messages I never sent. "Are you okay? Do you want to talk?" I missed delete. 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 The silence was worse than rejection. At least rejection had shape, edges. This felt like floating in the middle of a sentence that never ended. One evening, my phone buzzed. A message from her son, my friend. Out of nowhere. "Coming home this weekend. Let's catch up." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. That explained it, didn't it? Or maybe it didn't. The weekend came. I walked past the cafe again, just in case. Her seat by the window was empty. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I sat down anyway, in her chair, just to see what it felt like. Ordered tea instead of coffee. Watched it cool untouched. I thought about her hand brushing mine. About the bench in the park. About the question she'd asked and left hanging. "Tell me, what happens then?" I never answered. She never waited. When I left, the seat was still warm, like someone else might sit down and carry the story forward. But it wouldn't be me. Not tonight. I walked out, the bell above the door chiming, and for a second I almost reached for my phone. Almost typed something reckless. Instead, I slid it back into my pocket. Unsent. It happened on a Tuesday. Not planned, not dramatic, just ordinary. I'd gone to return a borrowed book to her son, who hadn't shown up after the weekend like he'd promised. His mother opened the door instead. For a second, we both froze. She was holding a dish towel, steam curling out from the kitchen behind her. The smell of something simmering filled the air. "You," she said, almost like it surprised her. "Yeah," I said. I held the book up awkwardly, as if that explained everything. "He asked for this back." Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. She stepped aside without a word. I followed her into the kitchen. The space felt too close, even though it wasn't. A single pot bubbled on the stove. 2 mugs sat on the counter, one with a half-stirred spoon still resting inside. "You cook?" I said, just to break the silence. She gave a half-smile. "People do." I set the book down on the table, hands restless. She folded the towel over the counter edge, movements precise. Neither of us looked at the other for too long. Finally, she said, "You shouldn't be here." "I didn't plan it," I said quickly. You always have a reason." Her voice was calm, but her hands betrayed her, twisting the towel, pressing it flat. I took a breath. "Do you want me to leave?" Her pause was long, too long. Then, "No." The word landed heavier than it should have. I sat down at the table. She didn't join me right away. Instead, she turned the stove off, moved the pot aside, and wiped her hands again. Only then did she sit across from me. The distance between us was barely the width of the table, but it felt like an ocean. I thought it would fade, she said softly. What? This? You. The way I think about you. She shook her head, as though disgusted with herself. It should have faded. I didn't know how to answer, so I said nothing. Just watched the way her fingers drummed lightly against the table before stilling. I'm not supposed to want this, she went on. Not from you. Not from anyone. Then don't call it that, I said, my voice rougher than I meant. It doesn't have to be anything. It can just be us. Here. Her eyes finally met mine, sharp and searching. And when it ends, what happens then? I felt my chest tighten. I remembered the park bench, her same question hanging in the air. This time, I didn't look away. Then it ends, I said. But at least it was real. The kitchen was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She leaned back, closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, tired, but softer. You're too young to sound like that, she whispered. Maybe, I admitted. But it doesn't make it untrue. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, almost hesitantly, she reached across the table. Her hand hovered for a second before settling on mine. Not tight, not claiming, just there. I didn't grip back. I didn't need to. The weight of her palm was enough. Her eyes shimmered, though she didn't cry. I can't promise you anything, she said. I'm not asking for anything, I replied. We sat there, her hand over mine, the stove cooling behind us, the rest of the world quiet outside. Finally, she gave the smallest smile, barely there, but enough. Okay, she murmured. And somehow, that was everything. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing with us ever did. Weeks passed, and the silences got easier. Not gone, but less sharp. She didn't vanish again, and I didn't hover at her doorstep. Instead, we slipped into something that looked a lot like routine. Some mornings, I'd find her at the cafe, already at the window seat. She'd have her notebook open, though half the time she never wrote in it. She started ordering 2 drinks, black coffee for me, chamomile for her, without asking if I'd show. I did. Almost always. We never labeled it. We didn't talk about what it was or wasn't. Instead, we measured it in small things. The way her hand brushed mine when she slid my cup across the table, the way I caught her watching me fold a napkin too neatly, the way she let me walk her home without pretending it was coincidence. One evening, I asked her if she remembered the park bench. Which one? She teased. You know which one. Her smile was quiet, private. I do. We ended up there again, weeks later. Same chill in the air, same soft hum of street lamps. Only this time, she didn't sit forward, elbows on her knees, as if bracing for impact. She leaned back, shoulders relaxed, letting the night hold her. You were right, she said suddenly. About what? About it being real, even if it ends. She turned her head toward me, eyes calm. But it hasn't ended yet. I didn't answer, just watched as she reached into her bag, pulled out a thermos, and poured tea into 2 cups. Chamomile for her. Black coffee for me. Thought I'd try it your way, she said, sliding the cup into my hands. It wasn't the best coffee I'd ever had, but sitting there, shoulder to shoulder, steam curling into the cold air, it didn't matter. Sometimes I think about how easily this could have gone differently. One more unsent message. One more day of silence. One more reason to step back instead of forward. We could have stayed paused forever. Instead, here we were. She never promised forever. I never asked. What we had wasn't perfect. It lived in the margins, in the spaces between other people's assumptions. But it was steady, and it was ours. Once, she caught me watching her write in that notebook. What do you put in there? I asked. She hesitated, then turned the page toward me. Not words, just the time scribbled across the top corner. 8:47 a.m. I frowned. What's that? The time you first sat with me, she said. I laughed, quiet, shaking my head. You remember the exact minute. Her eyes softened. Some things you don't forget. We didn't need to say more. That was how it worked with us. The most important things lived in pauses, in half smiles, in hands resting on the same table. Now, when I think of her, I don't think of the beginning, the rules, the guilt, the almost confessions. I think of the way she slid my coffee across the table without asking. The way the bench felt less cold when she was next to me. The way, okay, sounded in her voice that night in the kitchen. I don't know what people would call us. I don't think it matters. All I know is that when she looks at me across that cafe table, notebook unopened, tea cooling beside her, when she lifts her eyes and doesn't look away, something in me feels finished. Like the sentence, after all that waiting, finally found its ending. And it sounds like this. Okay.